Ruslan.
It seems like every 500 years or so, there's a great schism, right? And the first one, to my knowledge, was the Oriental Church splitting over the in two natures and of two natures. Jesus, that
Yeah,
was,
the
I think that was,
Chalcedonian
yeah,
definitions.
the Chalcedonian, yes. And then there was the Eastern split at what, the year 1050-ish. And they
1054. Yep, right on.
1054, yeah. Then they split, and then of course we have the great Protestant Reformation with Martin Luther, and then it seems like we just kept protesting over and over and over.
There was a lot to protest. I mean, there were legitimate gripes.
Yeah, and it seems that we've continued, right? Like we've continued protesting, and so now there was a degree of structure. There was a degree, as flawed as the Catholic Church was, there was a degree of hierarchy, if you will, or some kind of structure, mutual submission. And then when you got the Protestant Reformation, there was you sacrificed some of that. And now it's like, and you have denominations that are 150 years old, 100 years old, that can't find any type of real tradition back, right? Do you think that the desire to split and protest is almost just embedded in us as Protestants? And the second question is, do you think there's another potential great schism happening? It's been another 500 years. Now we're in the age of the internet. Now there's mass information, and we're more tribal than we've ever been. Could we see another split of more, almost like I would say like a fundamentalist versus neo-evangelical split? Because that term got conflated in the last 100 years. I think intentionally by Jerry Falwell as like a political mechanism, right? To like, hey, we're just gonna all be evangelicals, and 50 years ago that meant two totally different things. Fundamentalists and evangelicals were separate, and now it's one and the same. Do you see, so the first question is, do you think it's in our nature as Protestants to just like, well, I don't like the type of music we play, so I'm gonna go plant my own church, right? and two, do you think there's gonna be a greater schism and a greater split that we've seen every 500 years?
Marvelous question. Great topic. I would say that you got to look at two parties, maybe three, when you talk about what is embedded in the blood. There's something in the blood of Catholicism because of when it was born, because of what happened. Catholicism, as we think of it, I mean, the entire Orthodox Church would say that's not the original church. It's an expression of the original church. The East and the West both lay claim to that. When Christianity happened first in Greek-speaking territories, you at least got to acknowledge that the East has some sort of a point in that regard. But the East were client king states. They were subject states from the beginning. Why? Well, geographically, the part of the world, the Eastern Mediterranean, it's at the intersection of three continents. Those people are going to get beat up and kicked around a lot more as forces emerge in any one of these three continents and want to transverse the continental gap, the intersection there that is Anatolia, Turkey, the Levant, Israel. Like, there's just going to be a lot of fighting there. People are going to get passed around. So the Eastern Church, it's in its blood that it's going to get beat up, that it's going to be on the receiving end, and it's going to be a little bit defensive. I still see that in the internet comments I get from the Eastern Church. Sometimes it gets through the armor, but usually mostly sympathetic to it. I get why that's in the blood. The Western Church had no threats from any direction. They had already defeated their closest rival, Carthage, in the Punic Wars, 125, 150-ish years before the time of Jesus. There's no threat. They just dominate. Now, eventually in 410, the threat from the European invaders picks up, but even then, it just sort of amalgamates into a new version of Rome. And the church is instrumental even in keeping Rome together. So in the East, you've got a take a beating kind of history that gets in the blood. But in the Western church, you've got more of an imperial structure that was still sitting there that the church was able to latch onto. Now, I don't know, how can you begrudge anybody that? There's an opportunity for the church to guide society. Everybody would take that, whether it's a good idea or take it, who's a Christian, because I want to make things better. Well, eventually that gets out of balance. And so that thing that gets in the blood of the Catholic tradition is an odd relationship with authority. That's going to manifest over time in practice in ways that to outsiders who are more geared toward personal autonomy, Protestants, Western liberals like
Yep.
myself, we're
Yep.
going to look at that and be like, I don't know, no more kings. I don't, that
Yeah. Yeah.
structure leads to all kinds of abuses.
Right.
Ick. I'll take my chances with my Wild West, Deadwood, South Dakota kind of approach out here. So, so you got to be empathetic to the Eastern Church ethos. It just happens, a product of its time. It makes sense, product of geography. You
Yep.
have to be empathetic to the hand that the Catholics got dealt. All right, that's going to be your thing. You're going to have issues with authority. Who should have it? Who should wield it? It will be a distraction from time to time. It's going to get weird and mixed up with the state from time to time. You can't begrudge people that. In the same way, Protestantism happens, 25 years after Columbus sails the ocean blue? You think that's a coincidence? We thought the world was full. There's a whole half of the world that we haven't done anything with yet.
Yeah.
Whoa. Like, you can go find yourself. There's a whole new thing that absolutely connects. And how would we govern there? What if we could do everything new? Not just church, but everything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we're going to go to a place that is incredibly sparsely populated and just try to figure out how to survive in this new world with new animals and new creatures. It's like going to another planet. Imagine what it would do to our minds
Yep.
if we terraformed Mars with some brilliant discovery that only took 2 years, and in 2025 we can go to Mars and just start an entirely new life and thrive on a new planet. It would change how we think about God, politics, the old fights of religion would start to change and shift, and some people would resist it and other people would lean into it. That's what happened. And so one of the things that I really like about that protesty attitude of the Protestants is it put a lot of emphasis back on the self-determination of the individual, and what a great system that can be for making a lot of people much more wealthy and comfortable in terms of economics, of making for just government that when it works, it's as good as it gets. It works really, really well.
Amen.
So I like all of that, but in order to make those things happen, you got to have a little bit of a fiery independent streak. Well, that doesn't compute quite as well with church, where you die to yourself, you take up your cross, and you follow him.
Yep.
So it's a great model for how to make a secular society work, a pluralistic society, but it's not a great model for how to make a local church work. And I think that's sort of the Protestant crisis, is combining these two senses of self, the individual that doesn't want to be told what to do, I think often rightly doesn't want to be told what to do by power mongers and the state, with the person who is dead to self and alive in Christ and owes everything about their existence humbly to this unmerited favor they received from God. And everything is about submission to everybody else, submission to God, death to self. I mean, these are such different values that try to coexist in the same brain, in the same Protestant soul. So I say all of that to say, we got to acknowledge that it's not just Protestants who have something in the blood. All of us do.
That's
but
good.
further, the second part of your question was, are we headed for another schism? I don't think so. I think we're headed for putting it back together.
Wow. Okay.
I think we are. And I realize I'm getting a little bit wild-eyed and excited, but this is all I do, man. I'm going around, I'm asking, I'm feeling this thing out. What you, I think, are going to see is the two radical distributions of the ends of the curve are going to go away. I don't know what's going to happen to them. Your left-leaning fundamentalism, super liberal expressions of Christianity, I don't know where those go. I don't know what the plan is going to be there. I don't know what those are. It's very tough to put a name on that. I understand the play. I'm empathetic to it. Like, let's try to just go with what's working, and maybe that'll position us to talk about God. But it's not super working, and it's ideologically difficult to see where that extreme end of the left distribution of the Christian church goes. It's very difficult to see any future for the extreme radical right end of the distribution of Christianity. I just do not see how Christian fundamentalism has got much of a future moving forward, except in very small, very angry enclaves. And the more that exists in the era of the internet, the more there's a camera right on it, and people can see it and be like, I don't want a thing to do with that. If I want to be in an angry enclave, there's one readily available to me everywhere right now, just in the spirit of the age. I don't need a church for that. If I want to be judged by people and alienated, if I don't adhere to the orthodoxy properly, if I want strict, angry, weird sexual ethics inflicted on me. I can get that from secularism right now. I don't need like your weird God thing mixed into it. There's no appeal to that expression of faith. And there's diminishing appeal to this other end of the distribution, the radical end of the distribution of faith. What that leaves is a whole bunch of people in the middle who think there's a God, who, because of the increased exposure and smallifying of the world through the internet, are becoming increasingly empathetic and learning to be less threatened by the existence of other Christians who don't do it their way.
Mm.
You've got more communication between groups. You've got more migration between groups without tremendous social consequence. People reach a point where they're like, this tradition I was born into, it has this glass ceiling, and I really want to experience these other things. I'm going to be over here for a while. And this goes in all directions. There's not one neat, tidy flow where like people come in this way, but then they land here. It's moving in all directions. We're cross-pollinating with each other at a rate we never have, unprecedented in all of history, and it's just post-YouTube. We've only been doing this for 17 years. So it makes perfect sense that at first it's going to feel like, whoa, we're really separating out here because we're all reacting to the threat of realizing that our enclave might not have the single grasp on truth that we thought it did. We're realizing how much of our faith was really predicated on our rightness. And now we just can't dismiss other competent Christians as we get to know them. But I think what you're seeing right now is the spirit of the age in terms of faith. It's starting to gel back together. People have adjusted to this reality. We're getting more comfortable with the idea that we might not have the market cornered on every read of every single text, and that our historical, theological celebrities might have been operating in a bit of a historical bubble and should be appreciated for the tremendous contribution. But I think people are figuring out that something is changing. Here's what I'd liken it to. You ever play disc golf? Is that a sport have you ever picked up a disc?
I've never personally played it, but my buddies play it all
Okay, how about golf? You ever played around?
Yes.
Okay, in either of these sports, you've got a really interesting graph that happens. At the beginning, everybody is in the exact same place. Every ball, every disc is in the exact same place. Everyone strikes it, and that introduces chaos into the equation. People hit bad shots, people hit good shots, and now all of a sudden, after shot number one, you are the most spread out and scattered that you'll ever be in the whole process of playing the hole. But you're all going for the same singular place. So you start in one spot, everybody hits their ball. But as time goes along, with each hit, with each throw, everybody's working back toward that same hole, that same spot. And what looks like utter chaos eventually becomes unity as every ball ultimately ends up in that same hole. Now, I'm not talking about universalism. I'm not saying everybody's equally right or all the ideas have equal merit. I don't think that. But I think we're getting to a place where this concept of convictional unity, you believe what you believe for a reason, and you believe it hard. And I know that because I'm empathetic, and I believe what I believe for a reason, and I believe. And if I get there, I can give you the assume you did not get there lazily. And if I can see that my cultural moments of me and my tradition informed how I got here, then I can give you the benefit of the doubt and assume that your story and the cultural evolutions and pressures that shaped your tradition also got you there. And with each of those realizations, we get a little bit closer to getting back to that same whole. And I think it's not just hopeful, but I think it's likely that the church, no longer the dominant force in society, and seeing each other in new ways and interacting with each other in ways we never have before, I think there's a chance for us to come back together in a convictional unity, something we haven't tried, where we lean even harder as individual groups into our convictions and our beliefs, but we do it with a newfound sense of empathy for why other Christians are leaning hard into their beliefs as well, instead of our previous mindset, which was they're crazy. They're just crazy. That can't be what it means. They're nuts. Now I at least get how you're getting there, and it makes my heart soft to you.
Yeah.
Now, imagine if this happens across a couple million Christians.
Yeah.
These aren't people who are less into theology or suddenly hate the Bible or just want to pretend we don't believe anything so we can get along and not be persecuted by outsiders. No. These are people who have had their heart changed by empathy, by a spirit-informed empathy toward their brothers and sisters And these are people who are growing up, and we're learning the ability, the art of disagreement, even on important things. We're developing a new skill set as a church that we haven't had ever. I mean, since Paul and Barnabas walked away.
Yep.
I think there is an incredible opportunity in what's going on right now. And I do not think we're headed for another schism. I think we're going to see a shaving off of the extreme loud fringes who aren't helping anyway. And I think the rest of us are headed towards something that is new and incredibly powerful.
Wow, man. So you're optimistic as I am optimistic.
Heck yeah.
Yep. That's awesome.
Kingstream Entertainment. Ruslan.
When the culture says do what you love, we respond with love what you do. You may have responsibilities that you aren't passionate about, but loving what you do means being faithful to what's in front of you, committing to excellence as if that were your greatest dream. Colossians 3:23 says, work diligently at whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people.
Love what you do. Love what you do.
Kingstream Entertainment. Ruslan.
Yo, thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. If you found it valuable, considering giving it a like and subscribing. This month, I'm releasing the Love What You Do collection. And to celebrate, I'm doing a 3-day virtual event to help us go from learning to love what we do to ultimately doing what we love. By the way, it's free, so hit the link in the description to grab your seat today.